Hello, the names in my story have been completely changed. Some place names have been omitted entirely for my safety. I am writing these lines from somewhere in the world. What I did and what I went through were terrible things. It was as if I wasn't doing these things. It felt like someone else was controlling me. Events unfolded in a way I didn't want. I never knew my parents. I always tried to figure out where I came from and how I got here, but I never succeeded. I had almost no clues to follow. For years, I searched in vain but found nothing. The state adopted me as a baby and provided for me to some extent. After leaving the orphanage, I lived with a few friends. We attended high school and worked at the same time, barely making ends meet with rent and food expenses. My life continued this way. Then came the university entrance exams. I got into one of the top universities in Turkey, studying archaeology while also working. I got along very well with my friends and professors. It was perhaps the best time of my life. Our days at school were enjoyable. Time passed, and eventually, I reached my final year. One day, our professor called me and 3 of my friends to his office. "Come on, young people," he said. "We're going to one of the most beautiful places in our country together. This will be a special mission just for the 5 of us. I've arranged all the necessary permits with the government to conduct this research. In a few days, get ready, we'll be heading out. Prepare your tents and gear, we'll be leaving soon," he said. The time came, and we set off for that city in our professor's car. On the way, our professor gave us some information about the site where we would be conducting our research. He went off topic for a moment. He mentioned that there might be some magic involved in the place we were going. He also said that we should be very careful. This made us both excited and a bit uneasy. We reached the city without taking a break. When we entered the city, our professor told us, "Wait for me for about 10 minutes. I need to attend a meeting. Then I'll be back." During this time, our professor started acting a bit strange. About 15 minutes later, he returned, got into the car, and began driving us to our destination. We parked the car and continued on foot, as the terrain was too rough for the vehicle. We all grabbed our backpacks and arrived at the historical site. The location was hidden by the government. It wasn't in any books, only known by the locals who had passed down stories from their grandparents. Our professor quickly instructed us to set up camp as it was already evening and we were quite tired. When we checked our phones, we noticed there was no signal. "We'll start early in the morning," our professor said before going to sleep. Before I went to sleep, I quietly spoke to one of my friends while the others slept. "The professor seems to be hiding something from us. What could we possibly research in the middle of nowhere?" I said. My friend replied, "Didn't you see the official permit? There must be something historical here. But he mentioned something about magic on the way here. I don't want to get involved in this. I don't like these kinds of things," I said. "Let's just get some sleep and see what happens in the morning. Don't push it too much, we'll see what happens," he said, and wished me good night. I tried to sleep as well, but for some reason I couldn't. I lit a cigarette and started watching the surroundings. I felt someone walking behind me and immediately focused my attention in that direction. It could have been an animal. I looked carefully but saw nothing. Then I heard what sounded like a child's voice coming from the cave. I was sure of it. I quickly woke up my friend next to me. "Hey, wake up! There's a child in there, I think," I said. "Go back to sleep. It's probably something else," he said. I stayed awake all night, listening carefully. I didn't hear any more sounds, but I was definitely scared. The next morning, our professor sent me and a friend into the city to pick up some supplies. "We're missing a few items. Go get them and bring them back. We'll be waiting for you so we can all go inside together," he said. My friend and I drove into the city, got the items, and stopped for some tea at a local cafe. I noticed a local newspaper on the table with a headline about a missing child. The story was spread across 3 pages with large headlines. I glanced at the pictures and then quickly left, heading back to the camp. When we returned, the professor said, Let's go inside for a quick exploration. We all moved forward together. The professor pointed out a spot for the others. He instructed them to carefully brush the area to reveal what lay beneath. He took me with him deeper into the cave. We need to be very careful and inspect every corner, the professor said. All right, but why did we leave the others outside? I asked. There's a fossil out there. Let them work on it, and we'll join them later, he replied. Using my flashlight, I noticed a few scorpions crawling on a symbol carved into the rock. Without saying anything to the professor, I continued on my way. The professor noticed it too but didn't mention it. Let's go back to the others. We shouldn't leave them alone, he said with a smile on his face. Something was definitely off about this situation. My trust in the professor had completely eroded. He had mentioned magic earlier during the drive. Let's see what happens, I thought to myself. That night, after setting up camp, we sat around a fire eating something. The professor announced, I'm going into the city. Don't wait up for me, just go to sleep. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. I'll grab some food and drinks, and I need to make some phone calls. As you know, there's no signal here. We went to sleep, but I didn't. I was already suspicious of the professor, and then I heard noises from the cave. It sounded like someone was hitting the stones. I stepped out of the tent, lit a cigarette, and focused my attention on that direction. Suddenly, a thick fog enveloped the area. I quietly started walking towards the cave. Just as I was about to enter the cave, a swarm of bats attacked me. There were so many of them. I immediately ran back to the tent. What was that? I muttered to myself. I tried to sleep but only dozed off for a few minutes. During that brief moment, I had a dream. I dreamed that I was standing in front of the symbol inside the cave. I was reaching out to touch it. The missing child from the newspaper appeared and said, "Don't touch it. You'll disappear like me, and no one will ever find you. Don't do it." The word, "don't," echoed through the cave as I suddenly woke up to the sound of footsteps. I peeked out of the tent and saw our professor and another man. They checked the other tent first and then came to ours. I pretended to be asleep. They opened the tent flap and looked inside. "All right, Professor, they're asleep," said the man. The professor and the man started talking outside. I eavesdropped on their conversation. "Professor, I found the symbol. We need to get them out while they're still asleep," the man said. The professor replied, "Okay, but we need to be very quiet. I'll break the talisman. Let's hope there aren't too many guardians. If there are just one or two, we can handle it. Grab the pickaxe and shovel. Let's go. The students won't wake up, I hope." "Don't worry, they won't. I wore them out today. Let me check one more time, just to be sure." He looked inside the tent again. He saw me and my friend still sleeping. Then they headed back to the cave. I had heard everything. I carefully opened the tent flap and considered following them. The professor mentioned a talisman, which meant there could be something dangerous inside. The man was likely some sort of sorcerer. I had heard similar stories before and read about them in some books. There were probably Jinn inside, and likely a large amount of treasure as well. I lit another cigarette behind the tent, keeping my eyes on the cave entrance. They returned about 2 hours later, both excited and anxious. I pretended to be asleep again. They checked the tents and then started talking again. "We'll finish this tomorrow. Don't let any of the students enter the cave, and don't let them see what we're digging up. One of the guardians caused some trouble. I'll try to negotiate with him again. If that doesn't work, I'll have to burn him. There's no other choice. Otherwise, we won't be able to get the gold figurines and that golden crown. Remove the talisman in the morning. Let's get some rest. You'll have to endure some sleeplessness, but it'll be worth it," said the professor. "All right, Professor, it'll be fine," replied the man. I had heard everything. The professor went to drop off the man, and I stepped out of the tent. I looked towards the cave, realizing that something was definitely inside. I could hear the call to prayer from the city, and the fog was starting to dissipate. I had some time to think before the professor returned. What can I do? I thought to myself. They had mentioned gold figurines and a crown. They planned to take them and become rich. They had brought us here under the guise of an archaeological dig, using us. The professor had even obtained official permits, making it all seem legitimate. He would walk away scot-free. The sun had fully risen by the time the professor returned, carrying some breakfast items. Good morning, everyone. I brought you some breakfast. Let's eat quickly and get back to work, he said. Okay, Professor, we replied. I asked the professor if I could go into the city after breakfast. I need to make a few phone calls, I said. Sure, but be quick. Don't waste time, he replied. I drove into the city and made some calls. Since I studied archaeology, I had a lot of connections. Growing up in an orphanage had also led me to meet some mysterious people. My phone book had various contacts. I called a few people and told them I had some valuable items. I'll bring them to you, but I'll only sell if I get the price I want, I said. The person I called replied, No problem, bring them over. If they're valuable, you'll get what you want. That was good news. I quickly bought a kitchen knife from a shop and stopped by a pharmacy for some gauze and ether. I headed back to the camp and started working alongside the others. We worked non-stop, all of us exhausted. My knees and feet were aching. I made sure not to let on that I knew anything, working diligently. By the time the sun set, the professor said, That's enough for today. We'll continue tomorrow. Let's have dinner. It was evening, and everyone was completely worn out. I was also exhausted, but I knew I couldn't sleep. There was no other choice. After checking on everyone, the professor headed towards the car again. I took a short nap, and about an hour later, the professor returned. I was extremely anxious. Everyone else was fast asleep, but I heard the footsteps again. The professor and the man had returned. I quickly lay down and pretended to be asleep. They checked the tents and then headed back to the cave. I waited about 15 minutes and then heard shouting from inside. I quietly exited the tent and moved towards the cave. I could see the light in the distance. As I got closer, I could make out the silhouettes of the men. I was getting scared, to be honest, and moved forward like a mouse, silently. I got about 20 meters away from them when I heard strange sounds and echoes. The sorcerer then said, All right, I'd burn both of them. They didn't want to negotiate. Let's take the treasure. When I heard this, I panicked and began retreating quietly. I returned to the tent and waited. I cut a small hole in the tent with the knife. It was about 10 to 15 centimeters wide. This allowed me to see the path leading to the cave. About an hour later, the two men returned, both excited and happy. They were hurrying but also seemed very pleased. The professor asked, Is the talisman broken? Will anything happen to us? The man replied, Don't worry, nothing will happen. At that moment, I soaked the gauze in ether and stuffed the kitchen knife into my belt. I silently followed them. First, I approached the professor from behind and covered his mouth and nose with the ether-soaked gauze, knocking him out. The other man saw me and was about to shout, but I quickly tackled him to the ground, drew the knife from my belt, and threatened, Don't make a sound, or I'll kill you right here. No one will save you. He nodded in agreement. He was old and quite frail. I dragged him by his hair over to where the professor lay. Where's the treasure? I demanded. He handed me the bag. I took everything. I started questioning the man. Is the talisman broken? Is there a problem? Tell me the truth. I knocked out the professor, but I don't know you. I'll kill you right here, and no one will stop me, I said. Don't worry, there's no problem. Nothing will happen, he replied. What are the talismans around our necks for? I asked. They're for protection, he said. So if I wear this, the entities won't bother me, right? I asked. Yes, that's correct. But there's no possession here anyway, so don't worry, he replied. After hearing that, I pressed the gauze to his face. He didn't resist much. I took his talisman and put it in my bag. I added a little more ether to the gauze and then made each of my sleeping friends inhale it. I also returned to the man and the professor and gave them another dose. The longer they stayed unconscious, the better for me. I took one last look at the camp. There was no phone signal here, so they wouldn't be able to call for help when they woke up. By the time they made it into the city, I would have already sold the treasure and gone into hiding. Before getting into the car, I made sure they were all still out cold. As I walked towards the car, I sensed a shadow moving nearby. "Who's there?" I called out. I approached the shadow and saw that it was the missing child, wandering around the camp. I quickly put the talisman around my neck and left. Despite it being the middle of the night, I called my contact. "I'm coming. Have the money ready." "I don't have time," I said. He replied, "Come on over, we'll sort it out." I'll summarize the next part without going into too much detail. I sold the loot from the cave for such a large sum of money. I had essentially leveled up in life. Selling it quickly may have cost me 2/3 of its actual value. Even that amount was enough to last a lifetime. I then contacted a friend I knew from the orphanage. He was someone I had endured beatings with and survived cold winters under icy water as punishment. I explained the situation to him briefly and sent him most of the money. I then found a way to escape to his country. I'm now living in that country. No one disturbs me, and my sleep is peaceful. Sometimes I regret what I did. I know we get only one life. I would have regretted it more if I had missed this opportunity. That's why I'm quite content with my life now.